Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's your favorite paranormal investigator. My name is Tim Sedano. Welcome to Paranormal Insight. Today, we're going to talk about here on the eve of All Hallows Eve, name of the episode, by the way. We're talking about the history of Halloween, and we're going to dive pretty deep into it. Not too deep, but deep enough to be fun as I play with the buttons here on my end. So let's dig into it. The celebration of Halloween has about 2,000. That's right. You heard me correctly. 2,000 years of history behind it. I did not realize that until very recently. Like I had an inkling that was long. I thought it was maybe last 1,000 years or so, but closer to two. Some say even three if you take into account different cultures across the globe back in antiquity. So let's move on. Let's move ahead here. So here's our fun little PS. Big warning. All of the slides were AI generated. So there may be a misspelling here and there. Just putting it out there. Okay. So you all know. The story of Halloween kind of starts. Well, okay, currently it's October 31st. Every single year here in the West, especially, but that became a universal thing just for the sake of, well, let's call it commercialism because it is what it is in the modern day. Back in the old days, though, completely different thing, and even today there are still traditional celebrations. So here we have a graveyard in this spooky twilight just before the sun goes down, and it was an observation to not only say hi to the dead, but potentially talk to the dead and to celebrate the dead. Those who had passed, those who had given their lives in battle, or perhaps lost their lives to a disease, or whatever happened back in antiquity. So the first stop was always a graveyard. And for those who celebrate various different traditions, this is kind of a Western, initially, it's a Western telling of how Halloween began and what it really is. And a big hello to Heidi in the chat. Welcome aboard, Heidi. Welcome to the chat. It's good to see your smiling face in the icon of your thingy there. Chat thing. Chat. What's it called? Chat avatar. Hey, I'm all like technically savvy today. Okay, moving right along. It was largely, like I said, the roots go back about 2,000 years, and it goes to the ancient Celtic festival in Ireland, with the festival of, as they traditionally pronounced it, Samhain. We call it Samhain because we're illiterate to the way to say Irish words, Celtic words specifically. So the Celts, or the Celts, depending on how you hear it in your head or know of it, and a big happy Halloween to you too, Heidi. They mark this as the end of the harvest season. Kind of makes sense. You're burning big pyres. You got to burn your leaves, and they're big pyres. And anyway, so let's make use of this and say, make it count for something as being part of a larger celebration. So this is the celebration of the end of harvest, the beginning of winter, and they believe on this night, the boundaries between the living and the dead were the thinnest. And we've all heard about that. We've all heard about how thin the veil is. And if you were fans of my partner in Scary, you have probably heard my paranormal partner, JJ Rose, and other psychics like her, including our own Michelle DeRoche here at the UPRN, speak to the fact that the veil is not only thin already, but it's practically in tatters. Now, is this something to really worry about? Yes and no. I mean, if you listen, there was this one fella on the Instagram yesterday put out a big thing, and he said he has the numbers to back it up that today at 11:45 a.m. Universal Time, that's UTC, 3:45 on the Pacific Coast, a.m. I might add, and continuing for the next 12 hours, we are in a cosmic conjunction. All these wonderful things are coming together, and they're going to potentially give about anywhere from something like 300,000 to 1.1 million of us who are open superpowers. So here's hoping that happens. That'd be cool. Personally, I want the Superman powers. I don't know about the laser eyes personally, but certainly super strength and flying. Gotta fly. At least being able to fly. Super strength would be a super plus, a super big plus. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so the veil's the thinnest. Right now, we're hearing from modern psychics that it's kind of shredded and tattered and hasn't really healed for like the last couple of years. During this process of thinning and ebbing and thickening and coming and going in and out of this time frame, yearly time frame, because it, like everything, kids, it's all cyclical. But anyway, at this time of the year, traditionally, I will say, the veil's the thinnest. And the bonfires and costumes were kind of interesting. It was a means by which to, and let me get back to my other thing here, by which to protect yourself. Oh, hey, now they're all wearing masks. Okay, before, no masks. After, they have little cow masks on. So they look like different creatures, and either cows or demons. I'm not sure what they're trying to be. But the idea was to protect themselves from wandering spirits. The Celts lit large bonfires of their dried leaves and all that fun stuff. They were burning the garbage, basically, like they do every year. And they wore costumes made from animal skins and masks made from skulls and all that fun stuff. And they are traditionally meant to ward off evil and confuse local evil spirits, if they happen to be nearby. Again, this is the time when things were thinning. Ooh, the veil was open and we could see the other side and vice versa. And I guess that also means interaction. During this time of year, as a paranormal investigator, I will say that once in a while, nothing this year so far, but it has held up in tradition, I guess is the word, that I get at least one call. It's like my father, my mother, my grandparents, whoever it is, came back and gave me a message on this night, the eve of All Hallows Eve, or on Halloween, or the day after. So within that 3-day time frame, which is interesting, today, tomorrow, day after, and it happened for a couple of years in a row, then it stopped, then it happened again for a year, and then it stopped. So it comes and goes. It ebbs and flows. Didn't hear anything this year so far. So it's only the 30th. We still have time to get the fun phone call. Can you help me out? And I gotta go spend my Halloween at someone's house. Hopefully not, because I can't really. I mean, I can and I will, but it'll be hard for me to make that commitment this year, just because I have a bunch of things going on. Okay, so here we go. So they wear the masks to confuse evil spirits. Cool. Okay, we're confusing evil spirits. I'm all about confusing the evil spirits. That's okay. But did it work? That is kind of the next question, isn't it? Let me go back to the thing here. All right, here we go. So here's our evil spirits. So the Celts believe that the spirit world, with the veil thinning and all that fun stuff, and I'm reading from stuff I prepared earlier, so I'm sorry if I'm not riffing quite as much. The Celtics believe that on Samhain or Samhain, spirits could cross into the living room and back. I think we talked about that already. As a means to appease these spirits, good or evil, they performed little rituals and left offerings, hoping to ensure safe transition into winter. That is, no one gets killed at this time of year by disease or whatever potential supernatural interference would or may befall them at this time. Now, we're still talking about the Celts at this point, but here come the Romans. And let me tell you about that. So, around, I think it was, uh, it depends on how you look at, well, shoot. Okay, so it was it was year one, like BC or BCE or CE or whatever it is you feel is most appropriate. Personally, I never got it, the whole BCEE, whatever it is thing. But I'm sure someone out there explained it to me at one point or another. Um, so when the Romans conquered the Celtic lands, they blended Samhain or Samhain with their own festivals. Now this I will riff on a little bit because it's fascinating, and that Rome is not the only example. Other cultures, as we well know, especially here in the U.S., but not necessarily exclusive to the U.S., we have various celebrations of the Day of the Dead, and they don't always like the Day of the Dead, I should say, which is primarily pretty much everything south of Texas, Mexico on down. I think they have a version of the Day of the Dead, or I forgot the Spanish word for it, but it comes up later on. Um, but there are various celebrations. All are roughly, most, not all, but most are around this time of the year, which I find super fascinating because it's not like we had the internet back in BC or BCE or whatever it is you want to call it. We did not. We didn't have that level of communication. Rome just went marching on through and conquered, conquered, conquered. And when they hit the Celtic area on Ireland, they found that there was a similar celebration. Well, Rome was semi-pagan in their own right, if not outright pagan, although the whole Christian thing was starting to take hold then, and I'll shut up about that. But they had a celebration called Feralia, Feralia. Now, Feralia, they did something very similar. They honored the dead and the goddess of new growth, specifically the goddess of the orchard, Pomona. You probably have a Pomona or a town named Pomona, and at one time, if it isn't still, was an orchard or an orchard town or a grow town or farm town or whatever it is you want to call it. That, my friends, is where the name comes from. Pomona was a Roman goddess of the orchard, fruit bearing trees specifically. Um, and this fusion added to some holiday traditions we still observe today. Now, the fruit of Pomona, the one that was her identity, was the apple. And what do we bob for every Halloween season? Apples. It became entrenched, enmeshed in the holiday festival that is Halloween, or whatever you want to call it. Yep, bobbing for apples came from the Romans. It was a fusion, relatively new. But because like for 1,000 years before that, no apples, and then hey, we're bobbing for apples once the Romans came into the picture. So the Romans come in, they give us Pomona and the bobbing of apples as a celebration. So post Rome comes and I don't know if this slide reflects this or not, comes Christianity. And this doesn't really reflect that at all. You know what? I'd like it if my slides lined up with the pictures. All Hallows. Okay, so we'll just use this. I see half a church in the background there, so we'll just kind of go with that. Excuse me. So, as our cultures further, you know, meshed and empires expanded and then receded, we have largely, especially in the West, Christianity kind of taking over, including it took over the Roman Empire, actually divided it for a short while. And by short while, I mean a few hundred years. Um, and then they said, you know what? Let's come together on the whole Christianity thing. Anyway, so they had a date post All Hallows Eve, post Celebration of the Dead, post Pomona Day or Ferelia, which was All Saints Day. So we celebrate the dead, and then we celebrate All Saints Day on the 1st, November 1st. And they honored and then following All Saints Day was All Souls Day, November 2nd. And now these days honored saints, obviously by the name, and the deceased. Wasn't that fascinating? They had a Day for the Dead too, really close to October 31st. So it's around there, man. That's 3 cultures now, I think. Well, kind of two and a half. We'll call it 2.5. Major cultures in the West, in Europe, that are having and celebrating and taking on a whole celebration for the dead to one degree or another. The church kind of incorporated their stuff into it, but again, it's like the Romans did with Pomona Day or Ferelia. We added bobbing for apples, and then became All Saints Day, and then All Souls Day. So we have those 3-4 days: 31, 1, and 2, October 31. November 1 and November 2, and we have this general celebration of the dead. I mean, anthropologically speaking, that's pretty cool. Quasi-coincidental, I think. Perhaps a little too much so. Was there a interweaving of these ideas way early on? Potentially. I couldn't speak to that personally, but it kind of makes sense as early explorers were figuring things out and, pre-established states of Europe. It was this spot of land or that spot of land versus, Rome and France and anyway. So as we move along here, so here we have All Hallows Eve. That is October 31st, pretty much. You don't know what I'm talking about because I haven't collapsed the screen yet. There you go, All Hallows Eve, and the spooky people sneaking through the forest to perform, presumably, those rituals. Again, AI came up with all this stuff, and I just kind of went with it. So here we have a bunch of pilgrims, or people of that era, which I find kind of interesting. Because technically speaking, I think that's a total misnomer. I don't think this actually happened. And I laugh because the AI didn't know that. But going back to our pilgrim-like friends here who have is a jack-o'-lantern, we start talking about colonial America and how Halloween was met with mixed reaction. Something tells me this pilgrim guy's about ready to huck this pagan pumpkin to the ground in some sort of religious fit. So, some communities embraced it, mostly in the cities. Out in the country, in the farms, communities like we see here, not so much. They're a little more religiously zealous. And Heidi says she's going to step away. That's okay. Thanks, Heidi. We'll see you when you get back. So there was mixed feelings about it. Some say, it's just a celebration. Yeah, it's a holiday. It's, the kids like it. Okay, so the quasi-commercialism was starting to happen to keep our kids happy back in the early colonization of the Americas. Which I found interesting. So again, some embraced it, some found it superstitious or inappropriate, and sometimes, just sometimes, they actually banned the celebrations, which was not too unheard of for the colonial era America. So, how did we really dive into Halloween here in the West, especially in the U.S.? Well, let me tell you a little story. Um, we can thank and or blame. I'm gonna say thank though. I think our Irish and Scottish traditions. So we had the Irish Celts and then the Scott traditionalists, and they brought Halloween over too. It wasn't just it wasn't just something that the English thought up, but it was still kind of embraced as a quasi taboo holiday, depending on how liberal you were, or versus how staunchly religious you were. You either accepted it or you didn't. But the Irish and Scots kind of brought across the idea, oh, Halloween costumes. See, they kind of did that traditionally by wearing the weird masks and the furs to make themselves look like animal spirits or something like that to confuse the old spirits, the evil spirits. So they said, hey, you know what we got for the kids? You're going to love this. They get to scare each other, and they occupy themselves the entire evening while we go drink. I don't know, drink or gossip or whatever. And basically, they distracted the kids for a night or two or three or four or a week or whatever it was, because they invented essentially costumes, and a lot of them were homemade, and you got little, I don't know, homemade deer antlers to make yourself look like a spirit or something like that. Carving jack-o'-lanterns was brought over from the Irish tradition, because they used to do that too. They kind of also confuse the spirits. But it became so much fun and so popular that it distracted the kids forever, because as soon as they finished their schoolwork, they could get to come home and carve a jack-o'-lantern, and that was Nintendo for those guys way back in the day. So it was a privilege. It was something they earned. Yep, you get to cut into a gourd, pull out its innards, its seedy innards, and save it, because we're going to dry the pumpkin seeds later. That became a snack. And yeah, why don't you carve a face into it too? And yeah, here's a technique I'm going to teach you. Don't tell anyone. And that technique is the lid idea. So you cut it at an angle so it sits on top. Or you also kind of did the same thing with the eyes and the nose and the mouth in order to make a jack-o'-lantern. Now, this jack-o'-lantern's weird. Again, AI creation. He's got braces on. I don't know what's going on with this pumpkin. But anyway, we're moving right along. So a lot of traditions are brought over to make the holiday fun. Okay, we're moving away from scary into fun. Quasi-commercialism here. Maybe someone made costumes better than another. Okay. And it kind of helped shape the modern American holiday of Halloween. And not only that, but that modern holiday has actually expanded across the globe over the years. For example, I'll give you a quick example that was relayed to me by a friend of mine. He's of Japanese descent. He's American, but at Japanese descent. And he says, "You're never going to believe what my cousin showed me one time." He says, "My cousin sent me all this stuff about Christmas." Christmas? And I mean, there are Catholics and Christians in Japan, for sure. But largely, it's Buddhism, Shintoism to a degree, not so much, but nothing really embracing Catholicism that much that they'd actually build a market around it. But no. Oh, no, no, no. It is a super holiday. Christmas. You know what other holiday is? You guessed it, Halloween. They go nuts. They hold parades, okay? And the costumes are way more extravagant than anything you're going to see at a party. Think Comic-Con on steroids, okay? Just turned the costuming and enthusiasm dial up to 11 because you're in Japan and it's time to celebrate a weird holiday. And it also kind of ties into Japanese spiritualism in general because they have a spirit or a ghost or a demon for pretty much everything under the sun. There's a demon, I will give you an example, and its name it completely escapes me, that will swap out your toilet paper for sandpaper. I kid you not. And they have a bunch of other strange demons and strange ways to take them down, too. There's another monster slash creature slash demon that will attempt to steal something from you, and I can't remember what it is, but they have little cups of water in their head, and they have to be careful when they attack because if they spill the water, they turn to stone or something like that. I think I got that part wrong, but the defense. Oh man, I should have been raised in Japan. Or I got to visit one of these days anyway. But their defense against the crocodile lizard-like creature with cups of water in their head is to fart on them. Yep, you pass gas and right in their direction. The louder, the more stinky, the better. And they will deflect said monster back into the water and they will never return, at least for that season. And I think they can take their entire clan with them. So, nope, don't do it. They got the fart defenses up. Maybe they eat a lot of beans. I couldn't even begin to tell you how and why that tradition came to pass, or story came to pass. But it did, and it's out there, and it's still part of their lore. I digress. We return to the history of Halloween as we take a look at the more traditional commercialism of it. Now, carving jack-o'-lanterns actually has its own tradition. And hey, there's more little kids right there. Okay, hold on. You know what? I'm going to go back here. Okay, so we have the jack-o'-lantern carving thing actually came from a legend in Ireland about Stingy Jack. Stingy Jack. I love these stories. Stingy Jack was a man who tricked the devil and was condemned to wander the earth with only a carved turnip lantern to light his way. Well, digging deeper into that story, I found that apparently the lantern goes out once in a while, so he can pick up a spare from any porch on that night. And he can also reignite his own lantern along the way if he's so inclined. But usually he'll take up something that kind of looks a little spookier and he'll just take the pumpkin. So if your pumpkin disappears off your porch and it isn't smashed in your driveway, perhaps Stingy Jack came along and did something about it. Took it with him on his forever, on his journey to forever roam the earth. That's kind of a sad story now that I take a moment to absorb it. I don't like that one so much. Okay, so we got to carve these pumpkins not to help Mr. Jack out, but to have scary faces, actually compete with your neighbors, and all that fun stuff about turning. We actually went away from turnip gourds to carving turnips, rather, because that's hard. Gutting a turnip and turning it into a lantern, I imagine that's a little bit tougher than pumpkins, and that's why we've transitioned to pumpkins. Jack-o'-lanterns were originally turnips. Big turnips. Good times. I forgot to mention that before. But because it was more accessible and they grew like weeds during that time of the year, hey, we'll use the pumpkin and carve our jack-o'-lanterns into that. So if Mr. Stingy Jack is out there, he probably has a pumpkin instead of a turnip. Just saying. Hopefully a small pumpkin. Because turnips, come on. Anyway, where did trick-or-treating come from? Okay, so now we're moving into more things for the kids to do for a couple of weeks, maybe even a couple of months as all this happens. Because there's the fun part, and then there's the part that's boring. As is with the case with, well, from my experience, not boring, but less fun. And that's, you know, presents, presents, presents. Okay, now we're going to church. And I got to sit there for an extra hour while the preacher does his thing and bestows his blessings upon the crowd by way of a story that lasts forever, seemingly. But no price to pay because I got to go home and play with my toys after I was done. But I imagine something similar was happening because we also had a more, especially in the U.S., especially in Europe, a more Christian background where we actually went to church on All Saints Day and All Souls Day and had reflection from the preacher and all that fun stuff. So you're wired on candy all night. You get 2 hours of sleep. You got to go to church the next day. Good times. But trick or treating was kind of the before and after reward, and it came from a medieval practice called souling and guising, where people went door to door for food or money in exchange for prayers or performances. So it's kind of like caroling, but around Halloween time, and you do a little tap dance for them, or you give them your own personal blessing, and they give you a little tithing for it, like a quarter or something, or whatever was equal to that, a shilling, a pence, who knows, but became a traditional thing around then. And since we also had a religious holiday in and around that time, people were a little more inclined to be benevolent. So there you have it, trick-or-treating. And when we talk about trick-or-treating, sometimes they become in costume. Let's move the slideshow ahead here. Now, this is a modern take on that. I don't know why they did it, but I'll show it to you. So here's a modern take on costumes. Now, they weren't wearing elaborate costumes, especially for the kids. They were probably more like very common ghosts, and especially when they were begging and or praying and or performing for money, little pieces of money, food or money, I should say. So sometimes they get extra festive about it and get more food or money for being in costume and embracing the spirit of the time more. Again, not a good representation. This is a very modern take on the whole costuming thing. The AI didn't really win me over with that selection, but here we go nonetheless. Kitty cats. We'll get the black cats here in a second. I'll leave that up just for now. So, actually, I'm sorry. We'll dive into it right now. No, we won't. Confusing times. I'm looking at my notes and I'm looking at my slide and I'm looking at the chat. Hey, Heidi's back. Hi, Heidi. Welcome back. That's fantastic. And to all of you others out there who are watching, listening, and join us in the chat. So come say hi. That'd be fantastic. You can do hi, bye, and then get out. It depends, And then we get the stupid ad that comes in every once in a while, too. I really wish you guys wouldn't bomb my stuff, man. That's just not cool. Anyway, let's move on to Black Cats and Halloween. Is Sherry here, too? I did not... There's Sherry. Hi, Sherry. I didn't see her come in. How weird. That's so strange. Hi, Sherry. Welcome. Okay, let's talk about Black Cats. Oops, excuse me. I can't. There we go. I can move my stuff now. So Black Cats and witches and bats and all that stuff. Okay, kind of scary Halloween stuff. And traditionally, I mean way back, they were, especially witches who had black cats as familiars. And I've had black cats most of my life, whenever I've had a cat, it just happened. They're all been black, and they got a little white spot right here in the chest. Um, every single one of them, and they found me like complete strays. Isn't that crazy? I think that's cool. Crazy cool. But let's talk about black cats in general and why there's such a thing on Halloween along with bats and all that stuff. Well, bats are around during that time of year, especially because they're stocking up, aren't they? All those insects are starting to, hibernate. And unless you're dealing with mosquitoes that are out in force this year, I might add. Anyway, so they're out there eating their bugs, so they're out in the night. Yeah, yeah, of course. And during the time of this year, it gets a little extra spooky when you hear a bat somewhere in the night, and people probably lost their stuff. But the symbols came from folklore and superstition related to death and the supernatural. Why? Because cats were supposed, especially black cats, were not only witch familiars, but had enough personality of their own in their own right because they were treated so poorly. They probably got a little sponge as being, you know, they threw. I remember a time where I hearing, not in my personal history, but of a time where black cats were so feared, people would just throw stones and cans or whatever they had at them to scare them away. The superstition was that bad around black cats, and for me, I had black cats, and it's like poor kitty, jeez, man, that's not cool in the least. So, anyway, I digress. So, a lot of things happen around this time of year that gave credence and or validity to superstition, basically speaking. So, we have a kind of associative fear with not only spirits and Halloween and all that fun stuff, but the cats that are come with. And think about the time of year too. It's not spring; it's fall when the kitties come out. So typically, if I'm not mistaken, this should be we're going to start seeing a lot of kittens this year, a lot of puppies, and because it's that time of year. They're they may not have been birthed around Halloween, but they're still walking around. They're probably at the beginning of the month, give or take. Actually, now like I'm think of it, the one litter I had born in my house, I think it was born around that time, like very beginning of October, if not end of September. So, nature does its thing. Bats come out, they're eating everything left, right, and center because there's a bunch of winter bugs that come out to gorge themselves before they go into a form of hibernation. So the bats are out in force, the mosquitoes are out in force, so the bats are out in force. The kittens are being born, so they're everywhere. Especially if you have a mother cat or a group of mothers of cats in a given town where they can constantly scrounge up food, they're going to have broods, 6 to 8 cats each. Come on. So yeah, there's a lot of cats floating around, and they're not all going to be tabbies, and they're all going to be calicos. Black cat is actually the most common animal, domestic animal, out in the world. In the world. And I will move on now from the kitty cats, which is a little bit sad for me. Okay, so let's talk about the Halloween parties and how they became popular. I think we all know the answer to this one, but in the early 20th century of here in America, or actually anywhere that you're celebrated Halloween, they became common and were also kind of quasi-social, along the same premise and reason to get together in the first place and even hold these traditions yearly, not only for religious and superstitious reasons, but to occupy the kids, to keep them in line for that part of the year, so they can have their party, they can do their costumes and do the trick or treat and carve the jack o' lanterns and kind of watchfully play while the adults drank or conversed or something along those lines. And as we became more modernized, the parties themselves became more modernized. The adults wanted to explore their childhood again, get into the fun, and now we have current Halloween where There's so many weird people out there. I digress. I digress. And I'm totally kidding because it's true. People really get hardcore into their Halloween. Um, I am part of a haunt where that is a haunted attraction every year. This year I wasn't able to go because of my back. But it was tradition to not only dress up. Well, obviously, it's a haunted attraction. You're going to dress up to scare people. But the costumes got more and more elaborate. I couldn't keep up. This year and the year before, they did a pirate theme, and I was astounded by the level of costuming. I mean, they went all out, and they have the costumes already. So, gosh, were you answering the door like this the year before? But no, I mean, there's some of our people in the haunt that are, and out in the world, that are just dedicated to being spot on, historically accurate to whatever. This is where Renaissance Fair kind of comes into play to a degree, because a lot of folks that are involved in the costuming aspects of that are the players there, are dressed to the hilt, wearing, if perhaps modern made, but nonetheless traditional garb of the day, including full battle dress knight armor, full archery armor. That stuff is not one light, cheap, or breathable, man. And you're doing this in the middle of summer. I mean, forget it. And now we have, October. You can probably dress up a little bit more, pull from the Ren Fair closet if you got it, and create a fun Halloween costume. Yes, I love black cats too. Well, I've had nothing but black cats my entire life. It just happens. It's so strange. Both times. I've had the cat come up to me, kind of adopt me. I took him in. And then the second one was a one that had the brood of kittens. Guess what color they were? Yep, all black. Anyway, I digress. Let us move on with Halloween and the fun things we're learning about it. Um, let's talk about one of my favorite subjects when it comes to Halloween, and that's the films. Now, this is a completely AI generated thing where we have all these fake movie posters in the back, but I thought it was brilliant, and I may just lift some of these for my own projects. But suffice it to say, we have a lot of we take the old tales of the goblins and the witches and this, that, and the other thing, and we have taken that storytelling and made it more visual, more cinematic. I mean, like the old trick or treaters used to do performances, one of the things they used to do was tell spooky stories. Anyway, so we took that spooky story idea, and at the early parties too, where they occupy the kids with carving up pumpkins, they tell the spooky stories. Much to the dismay of the parents who insist on having, whose kids insisted, I can't do it. Back then it was sink or swim, so it's like, yeah, just deal with it. And nowadays they kind of climb in the bed with you, I had a nightmare. Downsides. Anyway, so now in this modern era, we have the ability to tell all kinds of spooky stories. Some are completely made up, others are based on actual myth and superstition that has tradition going back these 3,000 years that we're talking about here. That is to say that at one fundamental moment or another, one fundamental level or another, we like being scared. Aw. And I just heard the cutest story that Sherry gave us. She's petting a black cat right now. It's a little, I don't know if it's a little kitten, but she's on shift at an animal shelter, and the cat's name is Boo. Well, give Boo a little scratch behind the ears for me, and tell Boo a good kitty. And let's move on to our next slide. So we're talking about, I talked earlier about commercialization. This slide really kind of, you know what? I think I've been talking over. Let me show you something. Let me go back a pinch. I think I goofed. Okay, here we go. Halloween images. This thing, the AI came up with. But I'm going to lift some of these ideas because they look kind of cool. Even if the words are completely foreign to me, I don't think they're even really words except for a few of them. But anyway, so let's move on to the next slide, which is this one. Now, we're talking about commercialization of the holiday. Yep, it happens every year, and it seems to come out earlier every single year. I think it was middle of August when when and Evelyn says, "How are you?" I'm doing good. Thanks for asking, Evelyn. Um, um, Sherry says he's a big cat, not a kitten. Okay, we'll give. I don't care. He's still a good cat. Give him a scratch behind the ears. That's awesome. I'm sorry, but talk about commercialization. Every year it gets to come out earlier. I think it was end of August when I saw my first Halloween stuff going up somewhere in a store. I was like, wow, just right to it. Forget end of school. Forget summer break or spring break or summer break. Summer break. Yeah, I know what seasons are. And yeah, it's costumes and candy all day long in these stores. And it is not to say that it's strictly for that thing, but like I said in our with regard to the folks in Japan, they go nuts for these holidays, especially these Western holidays. They love to dress up. They love to go in costume, and it's such a fun competition for them. They would they would empty that store. The store I just showed you, they would empty that store. I'm not even close to kidding you. And more power to them, I guess. I mean, keep keep the Halloween dollars flowing, but that's not to say that we don't all do it to one degree or another. I went out and bought a bag of candy. It was way overpriced, I might add, but nonetheless, I don't want eggs thrown at my place. So yeah, and there are consequences to not giving out candy. P.S. So it's become a major commercial event, sure, but it still has its traditions, and that's where we talk about other cultures. This is more of a Western version of. You can't see what I'm showing you. I'm so sorry. Here we go. Nope, it went away. Did it? Did it go away? Did I goof? I think I goofed. Okay, let's play it. Ta-da. Is it playing it? It's not playing it. Let me get it back up there. Um, it's fun when technology fails you. But I digress. There we go. Ta-da! So this is a celebration that's a little more U.S. based, I would say, or European based, perhaps. Definitely small town. Probably something you might see in newer celebrations, more modern celebrations. I don't know that they'd ever be this packed, but yeah, people in costume, everyone's celebrating. It's a big Halloween festival. Other cultures, however, tend to be. I'm sorry, I'm gonna make a little correction here. Other cultures tend to be. Did it again. I hate this thing. Are we having fun yet? But other cultures tend to celebrate a little more seriously, I guess is the word, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry, I'm trying to get things to, okay, play it and just want to shrink it and advance it. Nope. Darn, that is ticking me off. Okay. At the end of it? That can't be the end of it. Anyway, going back. Wow, that is the end of it. That is just strange. I had more. I had more. So let's go back to this fun image here. where other cultures tend to take things far more seriously, and it's still showing that version of it, and I didn't ask it to. Hmm. So yeah, there we go. Slide only. Ta-da! Okay. Kill the navigator too, but whatever. We'll just do that. Um, and I'm talking about Day of the Dead down in Mexico. We talked about that a little bit earlier. But I mean, they're serious about it. There's still traditions where they go to the cemeteries and they place the lantern, the the candles down, and they say prayers, and they talk to their relatives. They clean up their graves. They go in and they make a concerted effort not only to celebrate the dead, but to take care of the dead in one way or another. And I find that those traditions kind of awesome because I think earlier celebrations of Halloween were like that as well. And and that whole Day of the Dead thing was kind of taken from the Spanish, kind of. Actually, it was mixed with um, not only Spanish tradition but local tradition down in the old Aztec and Mayan ways and stuff like that. Because I think they had something similar. Um, not specifically those things, but nonetheless, it's a time where we take they, especially those who celebrate Day of the Dead, um, take their dead seriously. There's a pretty nice tradition actually, where you actually, you know, once a year take care of your dead relatives, give them a little homage, give them a little something to let them know in one way or another that you're thinking of them. Now, I can't do that for a lot of my relatives because they all got cremated. uh, or they're buried in way far off towns I can't get to without a plane. So I'm not able to honor my family as much and as well as I'd like to. I may go one. My maternal grandparents are local. I may go visit them, but everyone else is spread out or in an urn somewhere. Que sera. Let's move on. Um, as we move on, there are yeah. Okay, that's a pretty good. We have some safety issues that cropped up regarding these things. Now, they don't burn the bonfires so much anymore here in the U.S. I think in Ireland they may, but it's few and far between. And it's usually the little villages that are a little more traditional. I think there may be some celebrations here in the U.S. that are, again, very small village, very tight community celebrations where they still perform the more traditional version of Halloween. It's not transitioning for me. Okay, it goofed again. I will stop the sharing and I'll reinitiate the sharing because that should not be happening. And okay, so I'm back to my ta-da. Okay, there we go. The traditional celebrations again, mostly villages and smaller towns and stuff like that. And there's a safety concern whether or not burning big bonfires because somebody somewhere is gonna touch off the wrong thing, a bad firework, or say, "Ooh, look at the pretty light," and burn themselves, and that kind of thing. So we don't. It's not in a larger city or suburban setting. You're not so many sharp knives. I'll put it that way. Um, So it's also worth noting that while, especially when I was a kid, and perhaps some of our listeners and viewers as well have this thing, if you're of my generation or even a touch older or younger even, I really don't know what if the scare is still out there today, but there was a time in the 70s where it actually made the news Like yearly, there was a little pre-recorded warning. Check your children's candy because there are some individuals out there that dislike children and will try and harm them. And that was finding tape on the candy because someone laced it with poison. They taped it back up. Man. The other one was the um, booby-trapped apple, where they would have a pen, like writing implement, torn apart. It's just the spring and the inkwell thing. And basically, they were super careful about it. They got spring in there and they got the pen in there. And when you bite into it at the right angle, the pen shoots in your mouth off the spring like a little bow and arrow. And you injure your mouth. And you have to go to the hospital. And Halloween's ruined. And it's because people hate kids at the time. That was the excuse that was given. I don't know. Maybe people just ain't right in the head sometimes. And I imagine that's still the case today. There's still a danger out there. I remember when there was suspicious candy, my parents picked through my candy. And of course, I wanted to grab the first thing and shove it in my mouth. But no, 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 let me check it. And they threw a few pieces out. I was like, nope, nope, nope. Where'd you get this one? I can't remember. Nope, nope. So, yeah, the danger is real. It probably still is. I don't know if it's as much of a concern today, but when it comes to those type of things, you do have to be careful out there. So the bonfires are out for the suburbanites and the city dwellers. Not so much for the country folk who can actually, put two thoughts together and not touch the fire. But I digress. So let's move on to yeah, I can talk. I can do stuff. Okay, there we go with the masks again. Okay. That's kind of cool. Nope, nope. Okay. Let's start here. So, that's a dumb thing to put in there. Sorry, the AI helped me create this thing and I didn't really review it that carefully. But it is so one of the things we're trending toward is I'll go back to why not? Is eco-friendly costuming. Because again, my generation and generations thereafter didn't have hand stitched stuff. I mean, it became more expensive to put out hand stitched garments than plastic printed garments. I remember during 1977, all of the various superheroes or heroes of the cinema and television were printed plastic suits, from Scooby Doo to Luke Skywalker. Don't sue me, Hanna-Barbera or Disney. And the masks, the bad masks, they kind of looked like them, but the masks that went with them to play those parts. And it was the poop. We were so thrilled and excited by those things. And we really shouldn't have been because they were kind of horrible. And they smelled bad too. What was I? Something generic like a firefighter or something. And, they gave us the suit to wear. It smelled horrible. It was really bad. But just because it was this processed, leaked out plastic thing, I didn't like it. But as adults, they get the yeah. Heidi agrees with me 250%. It sounds like it. Yeah, they were horrible. But they were also plastic, and we didn't really have recycling in the 70s. Not really. I mean, we did, but it wasn't as concerted effort to make it a priority as it is now. Learned that lesson a little late, but nonetheless, there you have it. They went to the garbage the next day, masks and all. The only thing we held on to was our pumpkin candy buckets. Pumpkin candy buckets. Plastic, but nonetheless, they worked and they were a little more recyclable. That's the other thing. The kids outgrew them. I mean, year to year, your child's gonna outgrow certain things. It's just, welcome to the nature of being human. And on that fun note, we are going to take a short little timeout, station break-ins, a couple commercials. Enjoy, and some of you are going to get to see the TOL commercial for the first time. This is a film we're putting together. We're shooting in November, mid-November. So enjoy. This is the United Public Radio Network, 107.7 FM in New Orleans and 105.3 in the Gulf Coast. UPRN Esoteric programming at its finest.
Long ago in the ancient world, the Trebus Omnes Lux, later known as the Tridents, were celebrated heroes, defenders of humanity against unspeakable monsters. Today, they continue that sacred duty in secret, hunting the dark evils that lurk just beyond the shadows. They are the Trident of Light.
Follow us on Instagram at paranormal.insight. Stay informed on upcoming shows, ask questions, and see what chilling paranormal stories we're following. Don't forget to follow us on YouTube at paranormal_insight. Click the live tab to see our latest videos. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Paranormal Insight. We're talking about Halloween. We're talking about the history of Halloween, and we covered a lot of it. But not everything. So in our second hour, we're going to dive into more the mystical side of Halloween. And I'm not going to have as many slides on this because I just don't. But we are going to have a pretty frank discussion, and I'd like my listeners, especially those in the chat, help me out, maybe comment, spark some ideas. Pardon. And thank you for the welcome back. The traditions of Halloween started with a spiritual background. That is, and decidedly pagan spiritual background. People were afraid of what went bump in the night. If only they had the TOL back then. But I won't I won't promote here on this particular show. But there was a serious concern about that. And it makes me wonder what our ancestors, collectively, our ancestors, were afraid of. I mean, they obviously saw something that, one, they didn't understand, or two, they were simply afraid of. We've seen stuff with that fear still there. The fear of the unknown and what could be is still out there for us humans. I refer to an Instagram post I saw that was a montage of various things screaming at you from the forest. And I mean full-blown armed sheriffs getting a call about something going bump in the night or screaming in the night, and they caught it on their dash cams and on their personal cameras, their body cams, and the horrible noises these things made. I mean, if they were being punked, kudos to the sound engineer on that, because that was amazingly well done to spook these guys. But to hear reports, the after reports of these things, to hear these officers speak to these perceived dangers was nothing short of terrifying. The shake in their voice, the dread in their eyes was, well, palpable. I mean, you felt for them. They were afraid. And if you heard the noises, probably for very good reason. Now, what were they? Was it a fox? Was it a deer? Have you ever heard a rabbit scream? That you know, if you're a deer scream, they sound freaking weird. They do not sound like what you expect. There's also a number of animals out there that make very humanoid sounds, including there's this one bird, I think it's local, native, not local to California, sorry, native to the contiguous United States, though, and its cry is that of a baby crying, and I mean with the weird little hiccups. I can't do it that well, but and the wailing that follows, especially if a baby's upset, mimicked perfectly. And this is how the birds just do it, they that is their strange call. Other thing, like, oh, there's a fox. I think we have them here in America, but they started out in England and Ireland and stuff like that. They will howl, and you swear it's I think this is where the idea may have come from. A fox just going nuts. I mean, they scream at you. Ah! You know, they they're really frightening if you don't know what it is. And a lot of these calls kind of sound like that, but at the same time they have a human quality to them. I'm recalling one where these officers are responding and the roar, and just this prolonged howl, the scream, and it sounds like I beg your pardon. Sounds like when a human has experienced a loss and they howl about it. They just go completely primal and and they just let all the air out of the lungs at top volume. And at first, and if I've experienced this being in the military, when you're super excited or you're super upset. That that primal roar of a person, of a human. But it echoed with such power, it seemed, and it came out of nowhere. I mean, there was no man standing in front of these officers. There was no one in sight. But these guys slipped on the grass. They were so scared and tried. It was a tripping retreat. They were afraid. And another example. Well, actually, I won't give you the other examples because they're pretty much the exact same thing. Where something scared people. And I think maybe that's what we have to kind of consider when it comes to the spiritual stuff and why we have holidays like Halloween to kind of acknowledge what, that there's still something out there that we don't know, not entirely. And maybe kind of relate to it too. I mean, we humans are strange creatures. We like to be involved in cultures. We like to, for the most part, even if minimally, you'll still get the occasional wanderer who comes in for, I don't know, a lunch or whatever, or something like that. I mean, we all have our family circles, and then we also have our social circles to one extent or the other. And I think that's kind of where a lot of this comes from. You have something strange, and then someone else had the exact same experience, and we have fusion. We have consensus on that thing that brings us together. So there was a social aspect to it. Do we have an idea of what these things are? Well, we can probably explain a lot of things from animal calls. I was mentioning the foxes and the birds before just a minute ago. And so, yes, you could say it's that, but is it? I mean, we have the ability to record things in the field like never before now, and only the last 5 to 10 years. So a decade at most, when we started sticking cameras on everything, including our phones, including our cars, including our police officers and military service people. to see what they see, to hear what they hear. So the day of the crackpot, so to speak, hearing and seeing things is being chipped away at more and more because we're starting to see, as evidenced by video and audio online, and some of it's probably faked or created, I grant you that. But from what I have seen, especially some of these officer body cam videos and dash cam videos, there's definitely something out there still that we don't have a firm explanation on, a firm grasp of what it is. And it is part of the human condition to be curious and cautious. So I think when we're curious, maybe we take a couple extra steps we shouldn't, who knows. When we're cautious, we tend to fortify at a given spot or location, or if we can't fortify, we retreat. Classic fight or flight. And I think by and large, Halloween kind of started with the fight or flight phenomena. There was something that sounded, at least, or perhaps looked gigantic out in the woods, or was unexplainable, or caused such fear that to push back was to challenge your own instinct to run. Some people can do it, some people can't. And I think once the other fault, and I say fault with a grain of salt, but one of our faults as humans is we have to explain everything. We have to quantify everything. And perhaps to our detriment. I'm not saying don't be curious. I'm not saying don't seek those explanations, because as we have come to know over the years, especially in the last century or so, knowledge is power. But it could also be a false sense of security. Now, I'm not looking to scare you, but we have seen more things in the last 5 or 10 or 15 years come to light that confirms a lot of what we feared. For most of us in the paranormal field, we are, by and large, I'd say, convinced that Sasquatch is real, and the various tribes thereof, and or well, okay, I'll stick with tribes. The Yeti and the Nepal area in the Himalayas. And I think it's called the Tuk Tuk in Vietnam. I'm probably wrong about that. And then our Sasquatch here in North America. But they are witnessed across the globe. And up until very recently, we didn't know that. Or if we did know that, it was speculative knowledge. It wasn't confirmed knowledge the way it is today. Too many people have seen these things, recorded these things blatantly out in the wild. Some of them are faked. I'm not going to lie to you. I've seen the fake ones too. But there are some out there that go, oh, yeah, that seems very, very lifelike, very realistic. So for me, I am comfortable saying that we have, for the most part, confirmed Sasquatches out there. We know our military, here in the U.S. anyway, have encountered that creature, have briefed other soldiers on that creature. So I find that very hard to dismiss when so many things have said it's there. No matter whether you call it the skunk ape or not. P.S. aptly named. I smelled that sucker once, or one of them, and anyway. I'm diabetic, and I'm on metformin. If you ever smelled metformin, you're really close to the smell smelled that night. Just putting it out there. Okay, so getting back to what we have, what we know, and what we don't. What we don't know is sizable. I mean, it is, if we take a look and a step back at what we don't know, what we can't really confirm, including Sasquatch, I'd say that confirmation is anywhere from 85 to 90% confirmed as a creature. So it's not 100% confirmed. I admit to that. But for me, it is, as a person, personally speaking, as an investigator into such things. So, what about things we don't know about? We can't confirm. We also have new monsters coming out of the woodwork. Interesting new monsters. Things we thought were, at best, left to antiquity. I'll give you an example. Not too long ago, we had, and I think this one was fake, but the fact that it shows up a lot tends to make me think that there may be something to it somewhere. I'm not saying I believe, I'm not saying I can confirm, I'm not even saying I think there's a percentage of confirmation, but one of the creatures I often hear about is the rake. The physical characteristics of the rake kind of sound like a gray alien, but with very long, sharp claws for hands. And they have a peculiar mode of going to all fours. Humanoid, for sure. We've seen a few examples caught on camera. I will admit to at least one of those examples giving me pause. That is to say, I was not convinced that wasn't someone in a suit. Because there are a lot of contortionists out there that can do crazy, incredible things with their bodies, including walking backwards. We have a girl at my haunt who is such a gymnast, a contortionist specifically, who does this spike back. She bends backwards and does a spider crawl toward people. Ooh, it's weird. I see it coming last year I did. Saw it coming every night. Still wigs me out. But, yeah, she also, I asked her to demonstrate that low crawl thing that I saw the rake do. Yep, in the videos. Yeah, she was able to do it. And the thing is that the rake has very human proportions. Well, so does the Bigfoot. Now, the Bigfoot's a little more confirmed and a little more obvious to me as a offshoot of humanity somewhere, potentially, if not some sort of alien transplant, just like we're supposed to be if we believe in ancient astronaut theory. But the rake has a unique history in that its larger fame cropped up online, and a lot of people consider it a birthed fantasy and or modern rumor. However, there have been several tales regarding the rake that are from deeper in our antiquity. Lumberjacks of the old days and those who worked the forest and fur trappers and all that fun stuff has also been keyed into these telling. Yeah, keyed in. I've also reported, I can't talk today, have also reported these creatures. So, what's to say they're not out there? Further, we still hear about witches today. And I don't mean the white practitioners out there, not at all. I'm talking about the classic evil witch, bad witch, the one who throws curses at you, wears the pointy hats. Yeah, it's a little old school. There's been enough film and television about it, comic books. I mean, pick a media, it's out there to one degree or another where the witch has been relegated to something more of a boogeyman or or a creature of tale, I should say. But I'm going to direct your attention to a story. And I'm breaking my lamp. Okay. Direct your attention to a story I heard regarding witches and witchcraft. And it borders on. Well, I'll just tell the story. You can make your own conclusions, draw your own conclusions. The story is this. Deep in the woods, I think of Minnesota? No. Missouri? Yeah, Missouri, I think. Deep in the woods. Way deep in the woods. And this is going to sound like a Blair Witch, but it isn't. There was, and this is in the 70s, I think this takes place, maybe early 80s. There was, we're at the end of, it's not in the middle of what's known in the culture, U.S. culture anyway, as the Satanic Panic. It started with the Beatles, believe it or not. People playing their records background, and we hear, Paul is dead, backwards. And that gave rise to those in the entertainment industry to start with being in league with devil worshippers or devil worshiping. That has actually, strangely enough, been proven to a degree or another over the years. But for the purposes of the story, it was lesser known. And if you were to say that, you were going, well, really? Because I don't think, the guy who plays Archie Bunker's into that stuff. He wasn't. He was a good person. But during the, when there was a lot of speculation about who was doing what, especially when you're dealing with like the heavy metal bands of the era, which were kind of tame compared to most modern heavy metal bands. So like Kiss, AC/DC, most of your rock bands, not so much soul bands, which is interesting. But most of these rock bands were like picketed nightly every single time they held a concert. And it got a little out of hand sometimes. But for example, KISS, the real, it was an acronym, and the real name of that was really called Knights in Satan's Service. No, it was Kiss, because the one guy had the long tongue, dared to kiss him. And actually, I don't know about that last part, but that wasn't necessarily what was going on. AC/DC, After Christ Devil Comes. Nope. This one was great. There was actually something on the internet about this not too long ago. An old interview cropped up. It was like this reporter was blunt. So we know what AC/DC stands for. It stands for After Christ Devil Comes, or something along those lines. And I think it was Angus Young looks at him, looks to his buddy, I think Brian. No, it wasn't Brian Johnson. The guy before Brian Johnson, who I just blanked on his name. Never mind, I'm a fan of the band. Looks at him and says, "No, I got that off the back of my sister's sewing machine. It's on most electric devices. There's AC/DC. He was referring to power." AC/DC also has another term, which I won't go into here. But, so it was all about power and the fact that they were using their electric instruments to really drive home a beat in a song and all that fun stuff. So, that's just too funny in my personal estimation, but it was during this time, as I get back to my story finally, that we had an incident in the forests of Missouri, I believe. Or, dang, is it Missouri? You'll pardon me while I look at something on the internet, because it's driving me nuts that I don't have the geography correct. I believe it's Missouri. Michigan. That's what it was. It was Michigan, deep in the forests of Michigan. I'm not sure where exactly, but you're in the woods of Michigan somewhere. And there was a discovery made. And we've seen this in films and televisions, and I think this is where it was basically based from when you see this type of thing. In the forest, around in the middle of nowhere, in a very small clearing that was barely noticeable unless you were local who knew about it, they found an altar of sorts, smeared and covered with blood. There was indications of pentagrams everywhere. Bear with me. I know this is sounding a little bad against witches, but bear with me. Um, there was, I think there was bones found to one degree or another, and there was a mixture of both human and animal bones somewhere around the altar. And it was clear that someone was going there all the time, at least very recently in history. So, the sheriff's doing an investigation, the rangers doing an investigation. I think the feds got drawn into it to one degree or another, because this wasn't the only site they were finding like this. All over the upper Midwest, they were finding similar sites. Even down to the lower middle of the country, they were finding similar sites, and they were deep in the middle of like little pockets of nowhere, where it would be easy to get lost. So, along with all these different altars and stuff like that, they found stars, 5-pointed stars, carved into the trees surrounding this altar. They were able to determine that someone had broken up a larger pentagram made of logs, but it got kicked apart, like they were purposely destroying the altar space. So, they think it's satanic worshippers. They think it's, dark practitioners of magic and what have you. And they start actually going after the local witches. And these are white practitioners, light practitioners, left, right, and center. And they are kind of treated badly. I mean, never mind, a lot of them used to babysit other people's children all the time, and they weren't doing anything bad or untoward to them, with them, or around them. But because they had the stigma suddenly attached to them, they were avoided. They were pariahs. And it wasn't until a few years after all this had kind of simmered down a little bit, but not by much. I think some folks moved out of town, but someone came forward, and this is where the witches get set right. Get on the good foot, as it were. Especially the light practitioners. They say one woman comes forward and says, "Yeah, I did all that." Wait, what? You're responsible for the blood out of there? Oh, no, 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 no. I kicked the altar apart. I destroyed their altar, and I put up protection sigils all around it, in her faith. And she's questioned mercilessly for days. She's held in captivity, not in captivity. I'm sorry, she's detained for a long time. As all these questions are answered, she says yes to no. Do you know who did this originally? I said, I don't know the people individually, but I witnessed them. That's why I came back the next day and destroyed their altar, and that's when you guys showed up. Who drew, and it wasn't anyone that called them. It was it was a ranger doing his patrols, found that site. I was like, oh, we got to call it in. So this one woman's held in suspicion for a while, and then she's finally released, and she has something akin to like a again, this is back in the 70s, so it was still happening, sewing circles or book club or something like that. And not everyone knew her, I guess, decidedly pagan or alternate proclivities when it came to the practices of her religion. So she gets together with these people and she says, come on over. We'll do it during the day. So we'll have a special meeting of the sewing circle, or the book club, or whatever it is. And she's very forthcoming. She says, here's what my practice says. Here's what my practice believes. Here's what my practice encompasses as far as Christianity goes and other things. And she did, she basically had, it was kind of like a Nouveau Santeria kind of a thing where they embrace the Christian hierarchy. God, Jesus, Mary, Joseph, all the saints, all that. And so there is that there, and it gives the neighbors, for the most part, a little bit of comfort, but still a little bit of leeriness. And then they hear about another altar being found, not too far from where that one was. And this one's a little bit fresher, and it's further outside. It's like in the next little tiny like quasi village next door, up the road a bit. And you gotta realize you're dealing with old logging communities, so that were turned into more suburban little settlements over time. So the neighborhoods are not that big. I mean, they're really small towns at best. But the next small town has just found an altar in their backwoods. So now there's kind of a manhunt on / investigation. There's demands from the authorities to stop these people. And they start questioning of like, oh my gosh, who's been in town recently? And then who has left town recently? I mean, is there a pattern? Everyone starts turning into an armchair detective. So they're trying to collectively figure things out. And it goes off the rails often, and usually by jumping to conclusions. And they go back to this one woman, the first woman, who disrupted the first altar. And they said, okay, you kind of have an in with this. Maybe you can, give us an idea of where to start looking for this type of thing. She says, well, 9 times out of 10, they're going to try and blend in. They're not going to put themselves out on the front street. I am, lynched, for lack of a better term, or face some sort of punishment for it. So, that's not the answer these guys want to hear. So they say, well, fine, I'm going to do my own research. And some of them do. But again, they keep drawing conclusions without having all the evidence. So they go off, and there's a lot of false accusations. A lot of people get dragged out of their homes and beaten to one point or another. A lot of people are held by citizens as suspects for days in their basements and stuff like that. I was like, well, I've been holding them. I've been questioning them like I see on TV. Because Barney Miller is really like the centerpiece of justice at the time, of TV justice. Not really, but you get the idea. You're talking about a television show inspiring law-abiding practices that are really reserved for real-life officers who are trained in interrogations and actually have the authority to detain people. Yeah. But it gets rampant. It gets like those, so people may go missing for days, and then they're returned and they're kind of beat up looking, and it's like, well, they thought I was the guy or the gal or whoever, and they questioned me because they read something obscure that I happen to have in my front yard, like, oh, a horseshoe up on the thing. Oh yeah, it got that bad. You got an upside down horseshoe on your front front porch. That might be a little ritualistic there. You might want to, I don't know, because for good luck, well, who needs luck when you have Jesus? That kind of thing. So, Having said all that, having experienced all that, they keep going back to this one woman because she was the one who got closest, who found this thing first, disrupted the altar, and then the Rangers came in. So she was not looking to really tell everything she knew, only because she didn't want to be accused. And this is the accusation, the false accusation of witches and witchcraft and all that goes all way, 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 way back. I don't need to tell you about Salem. I don't tell you about England before that or London before that. I don't need to tell you about the Witch's Hammer, the book that was supposed to tell you what was going on. P.S. That book is referenced and brought into the forefront of this whole thing numerous times. And they say, well, our ancients knew a little bit more than we did. I mean, they practiced these things every day. Witch's Hammer. Witch's Hammer is largely, in a word, hokum. It wasn't even based on observation. It was based on a fundamental basic belief system, kind of rooted in Catholicism, but not really, because it was rooted more in like an offshoot of Catholicism or Christianity that was a little more severe. And anyway, so that was used to this, that, and the other thing. And it was, wasn't even logic, if this, then that. It was, I saw it, I thought it, ergo, it must be the truth because I'm being led to it. And if you're a deep into the religion of Christianity at the time, especially, you're going to feel as if you're led there by God Himself. That was the mentality. Okay. I'm Catholic myself. I know what it is to be moved by God and the Holy Spirit. I do. These people were not, in my estimation, not only as practicing Christian and Catholic, but, well, I'm not the best practitioner of said religion, but I do my best. But you're dealing with a mentality of panic, hence the satanic panic, because they were seeing, devil worship and pretty much everything in more mainstream things. But this case in Michigan that blossomed was becoming more and more of a, dare I say, a witch hunt. But it turns out they were going after the wrong people the whole time. And in fact, as there was another, I guess we'll call her a witchy practitioner, a light practitioner, who came forward and said, I think I can help you. Okay, now we're getting answers. So everything kind of not deflected, but moved over to her, and suddenly she's the be all, tell all of what's going on. Why are you worshiping? Well, okay, in my practice, we do this, that, and the other thing for this reason. Could there be a dark version of that? Possibly. Not the answers they're looking for, but they're a little bit closer than they were before, collectively speaking. I'm talking about the average citizens who were really kind of thrust into this whole situation and had to, by their own means and, via their own, thoughts and all that fun stuff, their own motivations, that's the word I'm looking for, felt it was up to them to stop this evil practice. Because remember, it is confirmed that they found animal and human bones and blood at least one of these altars. And you can understand at the very least that if it's happening at one place and they discover another similar altar elsewhere, probably the same thing there. Whether they check that second sight, I do not know. And I will say again, this is a story I'm recalling from a very long time ago that I am only just now bringing to the forefront because I ran out of material. But it's a fun little Halloween story anyway, and a cautionary tale, I might add. So this other good witch, we'll call her, um, says I have a few more answers for you. Here's what it could mean. And then they find a third altar. And it is working. They're starting to see a pattern now. There's an altar in this first town, there's an altar in the second town, and these altars are kind of ping-ponging and zigzagging up a given mountain and or very large hill, depending on your take. I think it's technically a mountain. But there's a third altar discovered. And this one has similar traits in as the first scene. The second one that they discovered was relatively untouched. The altar was there, simple, made out of logs, but there was little carvings into it and stuff that indicated some sort of dark practice. And I think there was even an intact pentagram log thing where in the center they burned a fire. That was not evident at the first site. It was evident at the second site, but at the third site, they have a similar level of destruction. The logs are kicked around, the altar's been kind of muddled with or somehow messed with, and there are no human bones detected there. Animal bones, lots. Lots. That's the only differential. There's squirrels and raccoons and rabbits, and I think there's even a couple of coyotes that they find pretty much immediately around this altar, either partially buried or not buried at all. No other symbols around it. Check that. There are more of these protection sigils similar to the first scene. So now everyone goes back to that first good witch, and they say, hey, up in town number 3 outside in the forest there, they found your markings. Don't go that far out of town. I don't need to. Everything's here. I mean, I have no desire to go out that way anyway. Just cause. So, well, yeah, but your symbols are there. I said, a lot of my practitioners of my type use said symbols, protection sigils. And they're kind of common. And I might add that I think rather than protection sigils, they were actually runic. Runic is more of an alphabet that a lot of people kind of decided on as being determinative of one thing or another, each little rune. When you're dealing with sigils, it's a little more personal. And the terminology sometimes gets interwoven, interplayed. You could transpose it very, very easily in a lot of cases, especially if you're more of a novice to the craft of witchcraft in general. The good stuff, typically. But the bad guys use it too. But to say sigil and to say rune are mistakenly, at least as far as if you're going to dealing with written authorities on the thing, and I don't mean witch's hammer. I'm actually referencing a few other things written by good practitioners and those who study the occult. So if you use runic stuff, that's a very specific alphabet. If you use sigils, it's maybe based on runic stuff, but it will have your own personal little signature on it, so to speak. So a sigil could be personalized and given that intention to mean this, that, the other thing. So it might be easy for a layman, like these armchair detectives out there saying, well, I see that sigil there and that sigil there. That means it's the same person. Not really. Not if you're using runic practice. which it turned out we would later discover that is the case. So just keep that in the back of your head for now as I continue the story. So, Good Witch number one is suddenly under the spotlight again, under the magnifying glass, and they have more questions for her. The authorities get to her first, and it's almost like the witch trials of old. It's a public thing. They hold her for questioning in a public venue, and it is a circus, and it is just way, I mean, the complete lack of propriety, as far as, I'm sorry, not propriety, um lack of protocol, because police protocol really hasn't changed all that much in the last 50, 60, 70 years. But the lack of protocol in this particular instance was abysmal. So they have a public interview, I think they called it, or public question, something, something. Um, Public interrogation was at, and so they have it in the town hall, or something akin to the town hall of the first witch's town, of the Good Witch, I might add. And they hold this public interrogation where they ask this woman a bunch of different questions. It's like, how come the sigils are the same? How come, they're placed in the same area? How come there's the same level of destruction at the two different sites, in town 1 and town 3? And she says, well, maybe there was another practitioner like me that wanted to break up the evil and stop it, at least to a degree. And, the sigils I use, and or runes, as we now know, are not uncommon among most practitioners, and they mean the exact same thing, so they probably put up the same exact protections. So, no one's really happy with that answer. I mean, it's too clean. It's too obvious, for lack of a better word. I mean, of course she'd say that type of reaction. She's just looking to save her skin. Well, I'll tell you what, you'd be looking to save your own skin too if no one freaking believed you. But that aside, she puts out a very reasonable answer, and it sticks, but only barely. She is constantly under some sort of verbal assault or physical threat whenever she goes out of her house. They won't leave her alone around her house either. And the sheriff is, it's a small town. They got like 4 officers. They can't really call in for backup. Otherwise, it becomes more of a federal case than it really already has. And the feds have kind of dropped it at this point. And they don't want the feds back in because the feds mess everything up. So, the police finally assuage the crowds. It's like, leave her alone. We're happy with her responses, and if we're happy with her responses, you should be too. That doesn't stick well with a lot of people, but it sticks well enough that they more or less let her be. I think she has to have family come out and kind of stand guard and outside of her house, and it's really horrible. But as all that happens, that's what I'm about to tell you. Yep, 4 towns up, there's another altar discovered. However, this one is untouched. It's just put together. It's built. And the altars themselves were super simple. They were just like someone hacked the tree up at a certain height and kind of put like an old school split board like they used to do when they're building ships and stuff. It was like good woodwork. They build a plank, they build that, and on the back of that it's like half a log, short, same size as the board they cut. The board was maybe 3 or 4 foot wide. This half a log is the backing for this altar. A few carvings are in it. Dark practitioner stuff, more runic magic, symbols, magic symbols, I should say, runic stuff, and fresh. And the Rangers are kind of on high alert for this type of thing, so they're watching for anybody. And one Ranger finds this thing, and he spooks somebody. This is at the fourth altar site now. He spooks somebody out of hiding, and they run. And they're not dressed in black. They're just dressed like you normally would when you're going out in the woods. No camo, really. Maybe tan colors and stuff like that. And I think it was a young girl, if I remember correctly. And she's sprinting through the forest like a deer, like she knows exactly where she's going, like she's been there 100 times before. And this ranger's chasing after her. And I think he loses her at one point, but he knows where she's going based on the direction. So he runs back, hops in his Jeep, and hightails it to the nearest little parking camping ground area. You know, you park your car and you camp nearby. That type of thing. And, yeah, they find a little family there. So the ranger asks, everything going okay here, folks? And they're all suspiciously happy. Oh, just fine, officer. Thank you for checking. And they had a weird draw to their. He couldn't place where they were from. I just gave it an accent. Don't use me as a historical reference. But they're always smiling and nodding and very cordial and slow and fantastic. So good to be here. And they use a term that is suspiciously or deceptively Christian. You have a blessed day. Gotta watch out for that. And that'll come to haunt the guy in a minute. Yeah, how many in your party here? Oh, we have 4, 5, 6 of us now. Seventh one ran off. Probably playing or what have you. You know what kids are. Girl about yay tall, has this color hair, and kind of looks like this, kind of skinny. And she was a rail, apparently. This young woman that ran off initially. Yes, that's her. She done something wrong? Nothing wrong per se. We caught her near this structure, I guess you want to call it. We even have some trouble with people doing things in the woods that they're not really supposed to be doing. So I'm just want to advise you that there is, if you do see her, if she comes back, I may have beaten her here. I thought she ran this way. That, there's a spot out there, maybe, and he gives a rough coordinate, like 3/4 of a mile or whatever it is. That way. Stay away from it. If you see it, just turn around and walk the other way. It's under investigation. How so? The guy asks. We're just keeping an eye on it, making sure no one does anything further, because they've destroyed that part of the forest. I mean, they've taken trees down illegally. They've built a structure illegally, so we're just keeping our eye on it. Very good, officer. Blessed day. And Ranger says, yeah. He's very careful not to turn his back on them, he reports, as he gets in his Jeep and drives off. Well, the first stop he makes is near his ranger station with a radio. He calls it in, and he says, I think we caught our people in the act. Now, they seem relatively nice. I think the term he uses is they seem to be good Christian folk. Again, I'm Catholic. I cast no aspersions at this point. However, in the story, you may. So he raises it in, and you got 4 towns involved in this now, and it becomes kind of a county matter. So they get the county involved because he's a ranger. He also has to get the feds involved, and so it's kind of there's a little confab in the middle of town 4. And suddenly it's overrun with authorities from all these different branches of law enforcement. And they finally coincide, and they get together and say, okay, simply put, we need to just watch the place, so let's stake it out. And the ranger, I think from the town 4 area, he was former Army Special Forces, I believe. He says, well, my guys, back when I was in, they could stake this place out, no problem. If you have access to that and you can activate them, or a National Guard equivalent, I get them out here too. Now, I know everyone's suspicious, very sensitive about the whole National Guard thing with regard to ICE and all that fun stuff. But in the 70s, that wasn't that big of a deal. If you did call them in, it was something super, 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 super serious. So, the feds think about it for a second. Say, okay, I'll make a call, no guarantees. So, there's a number of people staking this thing out. They're all mostly law enforcement. There's a few volunteers that were deputized. They'll stake out this thing. The first night, nothing. First day, nothing. The next day, odd sounds. Things is poking around. Big snaps, huge wood breaks. A lot of stuff distracting them. And, they investigate. They don't find anything. They always go back to the same spot. They have 3 days out there. So, night 2 comes, nothing. Day 3 comes. If I don't see anything by the end of tonight, I got to pull the guardsmen out. I got to pull the feds out. And it's up to you guys to stake this out if you have the time and money still. Okay. Night 3 comes. And on night 3, they lock out, so to speak. Night 3, they find that family walking into the area at night. No assistance, no light assistance whatsoever. And the moon is not full. I think it's a half moon. So not a lot of night light either, but they're walking this area like they could see it in the dark somehow, like they had night vision or something. And this is in the days when night vision was still kind of new. It was called astrovision because it was originally used to look at stars at night and have them illuminated a little bit brighter. So a few of those guys had an astroscope, which usually were mounted on a gun or a rifle, and they're peering through it, and they're going, yeah, these guys know exactly where they're going. And they have something between them, a couple of them, and it's heavy, and it's on a bar, like a big branch, big thick branch. And they're walking it through, and it's swaying underneath. And when they finally get to the site, they take this, whatever it is, covered in a black cloth, and they're all wearing black robes, I might add, with hoods on. And they lob this thing up there, they pull off the sheet, and it's a big buck. And it's still alive. It's just kind of twitching a little bit, like they kept it that way somehow. One person starts a fire right in the middle of the logs, shaped in the pentagram. Woof. Well, that's an illegal fire. You have a illegal hunt. You're not licensed to hunt, at least as far as we know. And they pull out a knife, and someone's about ready to gut it, and freeze! They bust a satanic ring. And apparently, they weren't the only ones, because they did some sort of, what's that called? When you trade information for a lighter sentence. For some reason, my legal brain just shut down. And they rat out like this huge network operating across like 3 states or something like that. And it was meant to bring about man's destruction, yada, yada, yada. There were going to be princes on earth, yada, yada, yada. So, that's your scary story. And unfortunately, it has a little bit of truth to it. And that is all the eve of All Hallows Eve. My name is Tim Sedano. This has been Paranormal Insight. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we'll see you next week.
If you have a paranormal experience that you would like to discuss on the show, please email us at paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com. That's paranormal.insight.podcast@gmail.com.